Next thing I want to do is introduce Dr. Martha Burns to everyone. She is author of over 100 journal articles and multiple books. She's a neuroscientist and a leading expert on how children learn. For 15 years, she has served as adjunct associate professor at Northwestern University. I had the pleasure of working with her for almost 15 years now, and I learn something new every time I listen to her present. So please help me welcome Dr. Martha Burns.
Carrie, welcome everyone. Carrie, can you hear me right?
Yes,
okay. So welcome. I'm delighted that you could all come. I'm starting with a slide that shows a question mark inside the brain because many of our students who come to us and speak languages find it very confusing, and I know you know that when they first enter our educational system. But the interesting fact is that 2018 marks a milestone for schools in the United States public schools in that minorities outnumber whites in the nation's public schools. 49.7 of the 40.7, almost 50% of the students entering public schools this year, compared to 50% of students a little over who are Black, Hispanic, Asian, or other non-white ethnicities. So that is a third. 10 years ago, nearly 60% of public school students were white. So we're all being challenged with students who are coming to us from many, many different countries. I was just over the weekend in Chicago. I'm in now, but I was presenting in Arlington Heights, mentioning that they have quite a group of Polish-speaking children in their schools. Polish seems to be a real large number of students, at least in that part of the country. Most of this is driven in the United States by Hispanic and Asian children, but not necessarily immigrant children, children born here who are born to Asian families or born to Hispanic families. There's been a large enrollment increase of Hispanics and Asians. Since 1997, Hispanic students almost doubled to 12.9 million. So probably most of you who are listening today have Hispanic students in your school, and Asian students have jumped 40% to 2.6 million. As the number of Black students this fall has been relatively steady. So our minorities, if you will, are becoming a majority, and for the most part, is non-English speaking students that are joining our school. So let's talk about second language learning. Let's talk about how the brain is organized when you learn a different language and how that differs upon when the language is used. These from research done really several years ago. You can see in print at the very bottom, and that this was done by Joy Hirsch at Columbia University, her colleagues, and published in the 1990s, 1997. And what was interested in, this is when MRIs were first becoming popular, and she was interested in, which you can see over on that, is how the brain is organized for a second language. And I put a little circle around that left-hand view of the two languages that this particular speaker speaks. The English, which you see in red, and then the second language is French. Now, just to explain to you what you're looking at, you're actually looking at a slice through the human brain right here where this green line is, and we've taken the top off the brain, electronically, of course, not in reality, and you're looking down on the human brain. In the brain, the left is on the left side, and the right is on the right side. So over here you can R, because that would be the right side. So we know the left side of the brain is very important for language. We know that front of the brain, which is at the top for you guys, is where we speak. And so when you have a person who is bilingual speaking two languages, the things you can see is the part of the brain where we talk is actually evenly divided between those two languages. And that's a hallmark of a bilingual speaker. Now, students, many of them are not true bilinguals. They're learning their second language with you in school. And the difference with those students that when you look at the area of the brain that speaks their part of the brain, you can see that their native language, in this case the language is Turkish here, you can see the Turkish language, their native language, has some regions lit up. You can see that the native English language has other regions lit up. But if they learned their second language before 2 or 3 years of age, what you see is a lot of overlap. All of that orange is really a lot of overlap where the two languages are presented. And what it means is the person here who's learned native language early, before they enter school, has a larger area of the brain devoted to language in general, and they can easily switch from one language to the other without an accent or with translating. After a student enters school, what we call late bilingual, we have two equal areas, but we have to build that second area, and that's the difference. The brain is wired for language. Human brains are wired for language. Language learning is an early test of our brain's learning system. And at birth, we have the potential to learn any language. By 6 months, we're starting to build the phonemes of our native language. And you can think that kind of like keys on a piano, and I'm going to explain that to you in a minute. By infancy, we start recording and mapping the speech sounds, not because we're listening to speech. An infant really can't understand speech, as you know, but it's already starting to register what is speech, what is not speech, and what the sounds are, and make a map of it actually in the back part of the brain, in the temporal lobe. Brain map is starting at about 6 months of age. And clusters of neurons start to be mapped for the individual phonemes of our language, similar to how keys on a piano would be. And we don't have the picture of the piano here with that black just a black square, but just imagine that there's a keyboard there, and each key, as you know, on a keyboard represents a different sound. Well, in the human temporal lobe, you could have each little cluster of neurons is actually representing a different sound, a p, or a b, or a t, or a k, or a g, or e, or and those sounds would be different for whatever language the child has been exposed to. The more languages a child is exposed to, the more keys they have on the piano. Now, if someone's exposed to a language, 2 languages early in life, or 3 languages early in life, they just have a great big keyboard. But if a student is entering our classrooms and the student is very fluent in Spanish, but really hasn't heard much English, or has gotten a little bit of English from the television, which, by the way, doesn't teach you English really very well at all. We have quite a research on that. You need to learn a language by listening to human beings speak other in a live environment, it appears. And so heard English, they may have been exposed to English, but have a primary lesson in another kind in their home environment. And what they have to do then when they enter school is they have to retune the keyboard. Actually have to have the keyboard tuned for the second language. That takes time. It takes quite a bit longer than it does to learn natural language the first time. It can 2 to 3 years to really get that to be perfectly well organized for the second language. And for example, in English and Spanish, you have many phonemes like a phoneme the and thin and thistle. One is a soundless one, the, actually, and then thin and thistle are a tiny little bit different. We have a Z in zip, we have sh in shock, we have j in pleasure, we have j in jump, and we have it in sit and mister. Those sounds do not exist in Spanish. So often the students have a lot of trouble making that conversion and being able to learn sounds and understand them. And for that reason, often children who speak, for example, will say see sit, or sounds like they're saying see sit, they don't have the distinction between an E and S. You probably know. And they often will substitute another sound of B for a V, for example. or a D for a TH, or a T for a TH. So they have to retune their brain, and the brain is very flexible, and the brain can do that, or children wouldn't be learning their language, and you couldn't learn French or whatever you wanted to learn, even as an adult. It does. Now, there are advantages to knowing two languages. Those of you who are English language teachers yourself, or bilingual teachers, are at a great advantage over those of us like myself, for example, who are truly bilingual. I'm French. I took French in high school. I know Latin, which you don't really speak. It isn't a spoken language, but I'm fluent in either, and I can't think in either Latin or French. I can read it, but I can't think in it, and I speak very slowly and quickly in it. So I'm a true bilingual. Through bilingual, we have some nice research showing that bilinguals are much better when you have two things going on in the environment. You think of it as multitasking, but where you have mental competition, where you're able to keep two things separate in your mind and work on both of them at the same time. And bilinguals are apparently able to keep both languages separate and keep them both available and active in their brain at exactly the same time. Implication for all of you who are educators is that we have three considerations that I want you to think about here. The first is the better language skills in a student's native language, the second language will be learned. One of the things we've discovered by doing a lot of research in bilingual education and English language learning is that many of the students come to us with confidence in their native language. They might know Spanish fairly well, but they don't know Spanish as well as a child, as well as the average child their age would know it in the country. We can say they have a developmental language delay in their native language. Perhaps they come from an impoverished environment where there wasn't a lot of language spoken in the home. So they have language, they've been exposed to the Spanish language, but perhaps they have a single parent who works two jobs, three sometimes, who doesn't have a lot of time when they come home to speak to the child. The child has not had the quantity of language. For that reason, has not developed language. For students where that's the case, immersion may be very frustrating for them, because when you have language skills are important, and you go into an immersion environment, the research shows that can be quite frustrating. Research suggests that older language learners better from direct instruction than they do from immersion. So immersion is how we all learn language in the first place course. That's how we learned it from birth to life. And actually, immersion is a very, very successful way to learn a language from birth to about 7. But about 7 years of age, and certainly into the upper elementary grades and in middle school, immersion is not as effective, the research is showing, as direct instruction. So one we've learned is that for older bilingual English learning students, retraining on the sounds themselves can be a very good, very direct training on this is different than this sound. This is a buh, this is a duh, this is a this is a. That training for the students can be very helpful as an adjunct to the direct teaching of the language, and teaching them grammar directly can be helpful. Third consideration is that evidence suggests that students should be encouraged to use both languages, that language switching is actually very good. So with a few years ago, we thought that expose a child to English, let's say we want them to use English today, we know that it's just fine for the student to be able to use their native language, whatever it might be, whether it's an Arabic language or just as the individuals in Arlington Heights were telling me, or it's Spanish, whatever. If they use both languages and switch back and forth, a true bilingual classroom, for example, then that seems to be very important for building parts of the frontal lobe that are very important for learning. The part of the frontal lobe then include attention and self-control and being goal-oriented. So switching itself is a good thing and something we need to worry about necessarily. I'm going to talk a little bit about is the Fast Forward program. And the Fast Forward program is a program that can be very successfully combined with a second language curriculum to build the language skills of students. The reason is the Fast Forward programs themselves, and there are many Fast Forward programs actually, start by introducing students to the sounds of the native language, where they actually have to hear the difference between the sounds that may be hard for them. So, for example, you're looking at a slide where the student might have heard the word zip. Now, remember, in space, there is no z sound. So, here's zip, but to decide was it sip, which is what you would see here, is in the left-hand corner. It ship, it dip, or it zip. And you have the student do 100 of those, or 150 of those in a 10 or 15-minute period of time, an exercise where they're having to actually make the distinction themselves, actually building up their capacity to perceive the phonemes. Since you have the capacity to perceive the phonemes, second level program, language to reading, it's called if it's younger students, it's literacy advanced if it's older students, and those students are going to start to associate the letters with them. So first thing that Fast Forward does is build up the child's mouth, the keyboard and the temporal lobe for all the speech sounds of the native language. That's much easier when a teacher is teaching the student to introduce words and the student already has the capacity to perceive them and to recognize them. And the thing that the Fast Forward programs do is they also teach grammar very directly. So the English language teacher or the lingual teacher does not have to necessarily spend as much time on grammar, and spend more time on vocabulary, can spend more time on comprehending sentences and on reading. And finally, the Fast Forward programs include 5 reading products, the ability for the students to be able to hear themselves read, actually reading assistant, or to actually read second paragraph and be able to figure out grammar, be able to figure out synonyms and antonyms, be able to do phonological awareness tests. So those activities are built into these computer programs, and then as I say, reading assistant, the students can actually read aloud and hear they've read and hear how it compares to a monk reading the same story. So it also helps them with their accent and helps them with their pronunciation. All of that can be quite helpful in supplementing what's going on in the classroom. So inaccurate language processing makes learning easier, and one way we can facilitate that rapid processing of the language is to have computers help us to enable the student to hear the language easily, to perceive easily, and to know grammar. So they're not sitting there having to translate as teachers are talking and trying to teach the students. Spelling progresses more quickly, and teachers can move and do what they do best, which is teach subject areas. So with that, we two products, the Fast Forward products, which are great supplements to bilingual classroom education and to general education of English language learners, and then Reading Assistant, which is a tutor where the student actually reads aloud, gets to hear how they sound when they read aloud, and are corrected if they pronounce words incorrectly or misread them. So with that, I'd like to open it up for questions. And Carrie?
Dr. Burns, sorry about that. I was actually on the line with one of our attendees, so I really apologize for the delay in that. So, right, what we'd like to do is take questions from the audience. So let's see here. So the first question we get are this first question is: my children are 4, 6, and 8, and the 6 and 8-year-old have native speaking delays. And would this help?
Oh, without doubt. I have used this with Spanish-speaking children. I've used it with Asian speaking languages. And it's extraordinarily helpful if their native language is troublesome for them. You would think that it would be great for the English language, but it actually also helps build up and tune the whole language network of the brain. So ForWord programs were actually designed by neuroscientists to build the heights of the brain that we use to process speech and language in general. And I have found students who go through ForWord are not only much better in the language, they're actually improving native language. And take that one step further, I had a group of students in Chicago area a few years ago were trouble. They were Jewish students, and they were having trouble learning Hebrew. They were having trouble also in English. But when we went through the ForWord program with them, it improved not only their English but also their ability to understand and speak Hebrew. So you aren't just teaching English with the ForWord programs, you're actually improving the brain's ability to process language.
Question is, and a few people have asked this question, what age ranges would this be good for?
For language learners, it actually starts at 5, and we have a lot of kindergarten students that we're using this with at 5, and you can do it all the way through high school. So the program's available and useful for English language learners from 5 to really 21.
So gosh, we are getting so many questions right now. Let's see here. What of kids without basic literacy? Now,
You don't need, the students do not need to read yet. So they don't need to read in their native language, nor do they need to read in the second language. So they can be pre-readers, and we have programs that are very helpful for pre-readers that involve no written letters yet. The ForWord language and the ForWord literacy programs actually are for ForWord literacy for middle school students and high school students, but involve letters. So students, even middle school students who are literate in English, benefit from these programs.
My question is, we have a freestanding ESL program. I teach 4 through 8th grade ESL. Is there progress monitoring and data to support the program?
What a wonderful question, and thank you for what you do, by the way. You're so important in our school system. Yes, the Fast Forward programs and Reading Assistant, probably one of the greatest strengths is your ability to monitor everything the student does. So you can see every single grammatical error they made. You can see every single error they make on speech sound discrimination. You can see their vocabulary confusions. You can see what they're good at. You can see what they're not good at. And you can see that every single day. You can sit for a whole classroom at a time if you want, or you can go into the individual student and look at every single they worked on that day. You can detail as minutely as you would like. So progress monitoring is probably one of the biggest strengths of both of these programs, actually.
Next question is about special needs students of a second language. Say you've got a Spanish speaker child who has special needs. Will the Fast Forward or Reading Assistant programs work for that child?
That's another great question, because actually Fast Forward was originally designed for special needs children, and it is now been found to be extraordinarily effective with English language learners. The original group that ForWord was designed for was children have developmental language problems of one kind or another, and that could be associated with autism spectrum disorder. It could be associated with a developmental delay. It could be associated with a specific language impairment, but all those special needs children do benefit from the Fast Forward program. The only caveat there, I would say, is a child needs a native language. They need about a 3-year level of language or language skills. So I want, if I had a child, let's say, who is 10, who has an IQ of 50, that would probably be fun as long as their language skills were that of a kindergartner. But that's the only caveat if you have a special needs child. They do need to have a little bit of language skills, and they do need to be able to use a computer or an iPad.
Next question, and just so everybody knows, we have close to 35 questions in the queue right now. We are ending the webinar in about 5 minutes, so if we don't get to your question, please email us at webinars@scilearn.com, and I will get the answers to you as soon as I can. Someone asked, what do adults do? This program is geared, we're talking about using it for like elementary, middle, and high school kids. What do you do if you're an adult with the same issues?
That's also a very good question, and I ran another group. I actually had some parents of children, Asian children, Korean families, who were at Motorola in the Chicago area, and I was putting their children through ForWord, and many of the parents said, could we do it as well? And they actually, at home, the nice thing about Fast Forward is if your child is doing it at home or even in school, it's iPad accessible, and there are some other tablets that's accessible, and you can use it on computers at home. So parents can use it with their child. You wouldn't do it at the same time the child's doing it. Your child do it, and then you would do a second version of it for yourself.
Great. So what we're going to do is, since it's close to 1:30 and we said this was a 30-minute webinar, we're going to continue answering questions until 1:05 p.m. Pacific time, or until we run out of questions. So those of you that want to stay on the webinar, feel free. If you don't, we will be sending out the recording link to everybody who registered. What I do want to do for people jumping off the webinar right now, I do want to announce the winner of the $50 Amazon.com gift card. You can leave if you want to leave, and you're not going to miss out on that. So I would like to name the winner of that card, and it is Rachel Dunaway. So if Rachel Dunaway could email me at webinars@scilearn.com, she is the winner of the $50 Amazon.com gift card that we are giving away to one lucky attendee. Now we'll go back to questions. Again, this is the official end of our webinar, but if you want to stay and get more questions answered, we will keep this rolling until 1:45. So we have some questions about cost. If you could email me at webinars@scilearn.com, that would be great, because cost is, different for different groups of people. So please just email me at webinars@scilearn.com. Factors go into that. So please definitely email me. The next question is there funding available for schools?
Question, the schools using title funds for some of these children, and there are other innovative technology funds that some school districts have. So yes, many school districts will grant and get funding for students, or if the students fall under title funding, then sometimes that works. Sometimes school districts use some of their special funds, actually, if the children have special needs. So funding available in lots of different ways. And if you're home, also there, Medicaid will sometimes fund us, and depending on the state.
Okay, so a pre-assessment that can be administered to students to find out what level they're at and what level they need to begin at?
So the product FastForward has on it something called Reading Progress Indicator, which is a screen that you can use before it even begins. It actually comes up automatically if you're using this in school. If you're using it at home, it doesn't always come up automatically, but you could ask to have it used that way. And so it pre-tests the child, determines where they should start, and then begins them there. Test them, by the way, they've completed some products to see if they've improved what other they might benefit from.
Okay, the next question here, hold on one second, I have to dig through the questions. Do you know how this program compares to the Imagine Learning program? Dr. Burns?
That one, I know often ForWord, because it was developed by neuroscientists and works on speech sound perception as opposed to actually formally teaching the language the way you might in a classroom. Often it's quite compatible with other programs, but it doesn't duplicate them. I don't know Imagine, so I really can't speak to it any more than that.
Okay, next question is, does this work all modalities, reading, writing, listening, and speaking?
It's on reading, speaking, and listening. We do improvement in writing, but there is no actual exercises that are writing exercises.
Okay, and let's see here. Is this a program people can access at home or just in school?
You access it at home or school. There are 3 different ways to access this program. One is you can get your school district. If your school district is using it, you can talk to a principal school and be willing to get it for an ELL classroom, let's say, and purchase it through a professional who administers it in your community, a speech language pathologist, an English language teacher, a bilingual teacher perhaps in your community. To do that, you can actually go to our website, www.scientificlearning.com, and click on the tab that says Find a Provider near you under the Parent tab. And then the third way you can use it, which is called Braille, where you just purchase it through the company, Scientific Learning Corporation, and Scientific Learning Corporation provides a tutor for you to help you use it at home. So it's access.
Beautiful. The next question is, can this, and this is an interesting question because I don't think we've ever done this before. This is a really good question. Can this program be compared to the Rosetta Stone program? Similarities and differences?
Okay, I use Rosetta Stone also, so I know both programs very well. Rosetta Stone actually, as you know, actually teaches the language through sentence structure. So you have pictures, and then you're a sentence. For example, I was on my way to Brazil and wanted to learn Portuguese, and so I heard the word bolo, and I had pictures of a ball, and I had pictures of other things. I heard the word elefante, and I had the picture of an elephant, another animal, and you click on, and then, as you know, Rosetta Stone, you can also say the word and hear it said. But it doesn't have, Rosetta Stone doesn't have specific training in the speech sound discrimination all by itself. It doesn't have very specific training in grammar by itself. So what I would say is FastForward works very well with Rosetta Stone. I start people on FastForward, and then I can move them to Rosetta Stone very often after they've gone through the FastForward language or literacy program and a few of the others, depending upon what their needs are.
That was a good question. We've never been asked that before of all these webinars that we've done. The question is, someone is an occupational therapist and they work with children with autism who have communication difficulties or who are bilingual. What are some special considerations when you're working with children with autism?
Okay, so children with autism, as you know, are quite heterogeneous. Some are high functioning, some have a lot more trouble. The one nice thing about children with autism that is true of all of them is they love computers and they love iPads, they love technology. So they weren't very well for the technology, but when you have a child on the autism spectrum, you need them to be able to attend at least about 10 minutes to a computer program at a time. Want to make sure that they have the skills that they need to use either an iPad or a computer, the keyboarding skills, or they don't need a lot of keyboarding skills, but they need to be able to press arrow keys distinctly or use a mouse, be able to put to the tablet correctly. And you want them to have a receptive language age of about 3 years in English or in their native language. So you would want a receptive language age of about 3 years. And by the way, if you're an occupational therapist, you can become a fast-forward provider yourself, be able to administer these programs and purchase them for caseload. And occupational therapists make wonderful providers. So we would love to encourage you to look into that.
And this was actually a really good question as well. Would reading assistant be helpful to help strengthen literacy?
Reading assistant is a literacy enhancing product because the students actually started about mid first grade level with real books that are reading, and they hear the story or the content of the activity is read to them first, and then while they're watching the printed page and while they're seeing the words highlighted, and they try to read it themselves. Now, children do need about a mid first grade level reading ability to use reading assistant, but it's a wonderful tool for building fluency, for building reading vocabulary, and building reading comprehension.
Okay, next question is, and this is a really good question, because I don't think we've been asked this one either. You guys are written some really good questions here this afternoon. What best age range for teaching a second language to benefit the development of the second language?
Well, so if you're interested in literature, the birth of 7 is the time where it's easiest to learn a second language and where it's easiest to become proficient in a second language. There are people, and you know many of them, who are bilingual, who third or fourth or fifth language, and when you are bilingual, that period of time becomes much wider. So bilingual adults actually can learn a third language and a fourth language extraordinarily well. It seems just being exposed to 2 languages when you're young seems to make the brain more flexible for learning language in general. So as a general rule, the best time to learn a second language is before 6, but the rule can be broken lots of different things, and one of those is if you're already bilingual and you're learning a third or fourth language.
Next question is, how many minutes are you supposed to use this program to get the most benefit?
For ELL students where their native language skills are normal for their age, you can do 30 minutes 3 times a week, the minimum time period. For students who have special needs, any students whose language they are not at each level, they would go to a minimum of 30 minutes 5 times a week. And either protocol, 30 minutes 3 times a week, 30 minutes 5 times a week, you're talking about the student going through the basic language learning product, which is either language if they're young or literacy if they're middle school, high school, in about 2 months to 2.5 months.
Next question is, and this is a really interesting question because we actually serve a lot of Chinese language learners in China. So what do you suggest for Chinese language learners?
Well, and as you say, we have several schools, many schools in China, in Hong Kong, and Singapore, where we have Chinese-speaking students using FastForward to learn English, but we're also seeing it improve their Chinese language learning as well in many cases. It tunes the auditory system, so it improves their memory and improves a lot of their language skills in general.
let me just make one comment to that. I've actually been over to China to visit some of our centers over in the Shanghai area. They run their children on FastForward, the FastForward products, and they alternate them with the Reading Assistant program. They'll start on FastForward language for their younger kids and then do Reading Assistant and then go back to FastForward. So they alternate the programs, and they have really good success. If that person who asked that question wants to email me at webinars@scilearn.com, I can get you more information about that. But it's pretty amazing what Reading Assistant can do. I just see if you have any other questions.
I would add, Carrie, that people in the U.S. in ELL classrooms are doing 3 days a week of FastForward and 2 days a week of Reading Assistant at the same time.
I heard that. That's wonderful. Let's see here. I want to go through the questions. There was another question. I've never heard of this, so I don't know, Dr. Burns, if you're aware of this. How does bilingual aid assist with the program?
Aid, and I assume what we mean by that is an aid in the classroom to the native language and help the teacher with the students who are early emergent English language use. Aides are often the individuals who administer the FastForward programs, who oversee the students while they're doing it and come the coaches. So bilingual aides can be quite helpful in a school district for being coaches in the use of these products.
Go through a couple of logistics that people are also asking about. Number one, our website is either scientificlearning.com or scilearn.com, and you can go there to get more information. You can find demos of our software online as well on our website. We also are going to put a link to the recording of this webinar on the website in about a half hour, within the next half hour, so it'll be available for doing with the next half hour. It'll be placed on our webinars page at www.ilearn.com/webinars. So you can definitely take a look at that. The next thing is I'm getting questions about, is the presentation going to be available, and will there be a certificate of attendance? Answer is yes. We'll be sending out an email by the end of the week with a link to the certificate of attendance, link to the presentation slides, and a link to the recording. Let me see here. We do have an additional question or two that came in. And it's a question about Reading Assistant. There's a question about, is Reading Assistant the second level to FastForward? So, Burns.
I was thinking again.
Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yeah, we can.
Is Reading Assistant kind of the second level of FastForward?
It's different because the child actually is reading aloud. This level to FastForward has really 7 levels. It has the auditory teaching of language levels, and then it has reading levels, 5 reading levels. And the reading levels are recently. So learning how to match letters to sound, learning how to code sound, and learning how to comprehend different grammatical forms. So that's the second level of FastForward. And then what Reading Assistant is the actual ability to practice oral reading and to have it's Reading Assistant because it's assisted reading. You actually have a tutor inside the computer that listens to the student and corrects them if they make a mistake. So Reading Assistant is almost the third level, if you will, of these products.
Last question for today. If we didn't get to your question or you have pricing questions, please email us again at webinars@scilearn.com. Last question is about Reading Assistant again. If a child starts on Reading Assistant at the first grade level, does it adjust to match the student's level as they do the activity? That's a really good question.
That again,
So we're talking about reading assistant. So say a student starts at the very basic level of reading assistant. I believe it's like K through 2 or 3, those reading passages. Does reading assistant adjust to match the student's level as they do the activities?
No, well, it does to some extent. I mean, it will get harder as you progress through that level. So in the grade level, yes, the exercises do progress, but the teacher can also select exercises for the level of exercises for the students. So really good. When they finish that level, the teacher can move them on.
Great. And again, just for everybody's, again, we will be sending out a link to recording presentation slides and to a generic certificate of attendance. I'll get that. It'll say, the subject line of the email will say link to build the ELL brain. That's what the subject line is going to say. It'll be thank you for registering for the webinar. A lot of people miss the thank you emails that go out. So, just wanting to let you all know what you should be looking for. And if there's anything unanswered, please email us at webinars@scilearn.com. It'll be on our website in the next half hour at www.scilearn.com/webinars. And I want to thank Dr. Burns for her time today. Great presentation as usual. So thank you very much, Dr. Burns. And we will see you online again soon. Okay, thank you for joining us and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.